Middle East analyst Frederick C. Hoff once defined political legitimacy as the decisive and near universal agreement by citizens on the rules of the political game within a given state. A political leader is viewed as legitimate if, through the eyes of their constituency, they have the moral and legal right to govern the state. This can be achieved through means such as elections, hereditary rule, ideological principles, or military coercion. A lack of legitimacy can often breed corruption, censorship, conflict, and widespread disenfranchisement, which can destabilize the structure of the state. Systems of government in the Middle East range from an authoritarian regime in Syria to a parliamentary democracy in Israel. In between is a theocratic republic in Iran, absolute monarchies in the Gulf, and presidential or parliamentary republics in Egypt, Lebanon, Iraq, and Turkey. Then there are states such as Yemen, grappling with conflict and humanitarian emergencies, where the CIA simply classifies the government as in transition. However, the way that government systems are defined in theory is often quite different to what's actually practiced on the ground. Even states that share a similar system function differently across the region, depending on their specific social and political complexities. An absolute monarchy in Saudi Arabia governs significantly differently than a parliamentary monarchy does in Jordan.
Those formalised aspects of political participation can be taken on by regimes that aren't really democratic. Electoral processes, parliaments, the implementation of constitutions, etc.
While the United Nations doesn't endorse one particular system of government, they do promote democratic governance as a set of values and principles that should be followed for greater participation, equality, security, and human development. These include a freedom of expression, an independent media, periodic and fair elections, a separation of powers, and a respect for human rights. While some argue that a state is either democratic or it isn't, others, such as the Economist Intelligence Unit, suggest that democracy can be measured on a spectrum. The British research company releases an annual index that ranks states on how democratic they are. Their analysis of 60 different indicators results in a score that falls into one of 4 classifications. The highest is full democracy, which describes a political culture that's independent, diverse, and flourishing, and only includes 20 countries in the 2017 index. Flawed democracy applies to countries who hold fair and competitive elections, but have a number of faults in areas such as media freedom and political participation. Israel falls into this category and is ranked 30th overall. Hybrid regimes are states that have shown significant weaknesses in the overall functioning of their government and judiciary, such as frequent corruption and election irregularities, which includes Turkey, Lebanon, Palestine, and Iraq. Authoritarian is the lowest classification and is designated to states that infringe on basic civilian rights, own or censor the media, and have little to no political pluralism. This applies to the majority of the Middle East, including Jordan, Egypt, the Gulf states, Iran, Yemen, and Syria, second last overall only to North Korea.
But it doesn't mean that in the absence of genuine elections, there's no political freedoms, or at least political participation. These two things exist in tension with each other, but they're not mutually exclusive.
From a population's perspective, the legitimacy of the government is not always determined by the number of democratic freedoms the state has. Absolute monarchs in the Gulf are able to maintain power and legitimacy partly because they can support the lifestyle of their populations, due to the surplus of wealth that's generated from exporting their large oil and natural gas supplies. In an unspoken agreement, civil benefits such as no taxation mean the majority of citizens won't openly demand greater accountability or diversity within political leadership. In contrast, tens of thousands of Iranians took to the streets in December 2017 to protest a range of economic issues, including rising commodity prices, youth unemployment, and institutional corruption. In response to what was the largest anti-government demonstration in years, the regime censored media and internet access and arrested thousands of peaceful protesters. To achieve and maintain political legitimacy, a state's governing systems depend on the consent of all factions of the population. With vast cultural traditions and regional complexities to consider, the established rules don't necessarily need to mirror what we're familiar with in the West. But if they can't be agreed upon, regimes will continue to corrupt the political game, consolidating power through means that only further disillusion its constituent players. We have to go to a break, but stick around as author Mikołaj Naparolski joins us in the studio to discuss the 3 years he spent working as an expat in Qatar.